welcome back to the Forgetful Scholar, and this week we're going to chat about books, 2 books. So I have a cozy mystery, cozy historical mystery, and historical romance. So let's do the historical romance first, actually, because it's a revisit, it's a reread, it's one of my favorites. It's 5 stars. It is The Magic of You, a Malory-Anderson family book 4 by Johanna, Lindsey. I freaking love this book. So it is, it's kind of an example of a couple things. So it is a age gap romance. And the thing about this, if this was a contemporary romance, it would probably drive me a bit absolutely nuts. But since it takes place in the 1800s, I'm sort of like, okay, yeah, because that's at 18, that's when women, got their debutante ball and got married. So because of that, I'm cool with it, right? But if this was in a contemporary romance, oh, sorry. I'm in a weird mood today. So anyway, it would have drove me nuts because she technically is 17 when this starts, but her birthday's 2 weeks away. So she's basically 18 and he's like in his mid-30s. And this is also an example of what Johanna Lindsey does best is turned an enemy in one book, like the antagonist in one book, into the main romantic hero in the other one, and you want them to get a happy ending. So in book 3, Warren Anderson is Georgina Anderson's older brother, one of her 3 older brothers. She has 3 older brothers and 2 younger brothers. No, they're all older than her. But he's like the 3rd oldest, right? And he has a tragic backstory that turned him into an absolute piece of shit. Which, when you find out about it, you're kind of like, yeah, that's fair. And I believe this book came out in 1993, and it's about 400 pages. Like, up until the last page, it's still going. You know what I mean? So Warren is is filled with bitter hate. He has a childhood rival that comes, okay, this makes sense later, or maybe right now if I actually explain it correctly, but whatever. A childhood rival, and they always grew up just being rivals, right? And then he fell in love with this woman named Marianne, and he wanted to marry her, but at the same time, she was sleeping with this childhood rival on payment for Marianne. Like, the childhood rival set this whole thing up, right? She got pregnant. She wasn't sure who the baby's father was. She married the rival, destroying Warren's, heart. And then the child died, and Warren just completely broke and completely shielded his heart away. Doesn't want anybody to break into it. Doesn't want to care about anybody, stuff like that. So, I mean, I think it's kind of fair why he's a dick. But Amy, oh, I love Amy. And she goes through some shit. Like, there's a mugging, kidnapped. She gets kidnapped. She gets, yelled at by everybody. Like, she goes through some shit. But I love her so much. She's so... precocious isn't the right word. Because, technically she's an adult in this story. So, I don't know. She's wise above her years, which makes the story work. But also she's, fun, and she cracks jokes, and she's great. And her and Jeremy, who is James Mallory, her uncle's bastard son, her and Jeremy are like best friends, which I adore. I really like their friendship. She is, because the Mallorys either have blonde hair, green eyes, like her Uncle James, and her father, I believe, or they have black hair and blue eyes, like herself, her cousin Regina, her cousin Jeremy, and her uncle Tony. And in her book, you really get the sense of how Johanna Lindsey handles, magic. It's very real, magic realism. In a sense, she does this here, and she does it in a medieval book, Joining, I think? Anyway. It's like a family rumor that the black-haired, blue-eyed members of the family get it from their great-grandmother, who was a Romani. Now, that's just a rumor. They're not sure if it's true. And I think in their holiday book, it's actually their holiday book is actually about their ancestors' romance, which is, I love it. It's really cute. Anyway, I know it. I'm kind of going through the Malory-Anderson family books in order Can't help it. I needed a little pick-me-up this week, and this was really just, I was just in the mood for this. It was great. But I really like Amy. Like, she is so funny. And not like ha ha ha, but like she's just, because she's 18, right? Warren's like 30 or something. He doesn't ever want to love again. His heart is locked up tight. She's like, nah, you and me, my gut, my magic is telling me you and me, soulmate. So you know what? I'm gonna pursue you. And she does. So you have to understand, this is like 1800s England, and her family is titled and they have money, which, you know, and their family, yes, has a bit of scandals with Tony and James, but still, you know, the fact that she's just like, nah, I like what I see and I'm gonna go after you no matter what. It's just, she's so precious to me. I adore her. And like, she means it, and she knows it's gonna be hard, and she knows it's gonna be tough. And she just is set out to seduce him no matter what. And she even tricks her cousin into placing a bet. Because even though this is untested, she knows that if it becomes a bet, she'll win. Because her magic or her gut is telling her this, right? So it's not like she calls it magic, even though the title is Magic of You. It's just sort of her instincts, right? And her father, Edward, he has those kind of instincts when it comes to money. So that's where she kind of like listens to them from. Like, she learned from her dad to listen to them, right? So her instincts are telling her if there's a bet, like a bet placed that she won't be able to be with Warren, she'll win. So she gets her cousin Jeremy to place a bet. Like, it's really cute. And I'm like laughing when I read it, because I'm like, Amy girl, what are you doing? But it's so much fun. So at one point, she gets jealous because Warren wants to get her out of his system because she already like hit on him, and he's like, bro, no. And that's another thing I like about this book. Warren is like, absolutely not. Like, he fights her on until like the last couple pages, he fights her on it because of her age, because of his past trauma, you know. So I think that's also why I don't mind such a huge age gap in this, you know. And he's like, no, I don't want to be with you, but he doesn't want to like physically hurt her or anything like that, even though he's a bastard. And in this book, again, what Johanna Lindsey does so well, because in the book before, he wanted to kill James. Like, you did not like him, right? But in this book, you see moments of him being a doting big brother to Georgie, you know, being like adoring of Georgie's kids. And that's another thing. This book, it kind of, you stop in to see how Tony and Rosalind are doing. They had a baby a few months ago, so Judith is a couple months old, their daughter, and it basically begins with Georgie giving pregnant to her and James's daughter, Jack, who I hate so much. Anyway, literally they're coming to visit and she's having contractions, but she's still like in the parlor and everything like that. So you kind of see, and in his point of view, you see how deeply he cares for the people he cares about, but also how hard he tries to keep Amy at a distance, right? So at one point he tries to go to like a tavern to pick up a woman to kind of shake her out of his system. And this is Johanna Lindsey. So he ain't straying. Like, the moment they meet their soulmate, that's it, which I love. I love that about this writer. And how she could turn an enemy into like a romantic lead you root for, right? So she shows up in like her most low cut, trying to, you know, don't go there, I'm right here. And he's like, what the hell? And he's like, I'm taking you home, but it's like dead of night. And he doesn't trust her safety to anybody. Like, that's the thing. In this book, there's little sprinkles of like, he actually cares even though he's trying not to, and he's like not admitting it to himself. And the yearning, girls, the yearning, I love it. I love me a good yearn in a romance novel, and it's so good. They get set upon from some hijackers that are gonna mug them, and Warren is like enraged, and not because of him, but because Amy's there. You know what I mean? So like, again, like I said, there's like little sprinkles of actually he cares about, right? And at one point, because this is a crazy thing, because this book gets so big in the sense of like, before he showed up, he went into like a betting thing against like a royal prince of the Chinese Empire at that time. And because he won the bet, but like now they're trading line, Starlark, I think it's called, or Skylark, or something like that, are no longer going to do the route to China because of this, right? And the brothers aren't too pissed about it. It was like a long, like 2-year journey, so they're fine. But like that sprinkles in when he's sort of having an argument with Georgie about like her safety and all that stuff. Like you think nothing of it, but pay attention, because the prince and his like personal army show up, kidnap Amy thinking she matters to Warren, kidnap Warren and like lock them in the ship, and because they need the vase back, because the vase apparently was a gift from like the emperor, and he's in deep shit if he doesn't have it. So they end up kidnapped on a ship going to America, and Amy does some shit. And in this book, part of me is like, if you weren't in Warren's head throughout this book, and you didn't see like the moments that he actually really does care about Amy, he's just keeping her apart because her age and because of his anger at Marianne. If I just picked that scene out of this book and just read it, I would be pissed, you know? But because you see that, you see Warren's point of view, you see how you're shown, which I loved in this book, you're shown how much he cares about Amy despite his best efforts because of her age and so forth. That when she shows up in his jail cell, gets naked, you're kind of like, okay. But again, because she knew he couldn't resist that. Again, if you're just given that scene, you might think like, ooh, consent issues and stuff like that. But because Johanna and Lindsey did a great job of building up the slow burn of care, you're kind of like, oh, he's just being stubborn. Like at this point, he's just trying to pick out things so he doesn't admit that he cares for her. You know, just out of pure stubbornness and spite at this point, right? They get to America. He gets her out of it. She's known that it's compromised. The family demands Warren marry her. She's like, no, I don't want him because he has to. I want him to ask. He doesn't. She goes back to England and she's like heartbroken, but you can't keep Amy down. That's what I love about her optimism, right? And on the trip back to England, Warren's childhood nemesis is trying to seduce Amy because that's his new ploy. He's going to marry Amy because he thinks Warren loves her and she rejected him, so he wants to do that. And Warren is incensed. Yeah, that's the right word, right? Yeah. He goes to James and is like, this is what's happening. You have to get her away from this, because all this time Amy is staying with James and George to help with the new baby. So that's why, and James has taken a personal interest in this and he's trying to get Amy not to like Warren. And she's like, nah, he's mine. You know, it's like, Amy. And he doesn't even acknowledge Amy when she's there. And at one point they're at an afternoon tea party. I forget what's called, a garden party. And he comes in and he just beats the crap out of the childhood rival, but doesn't say anything to Amy. So that's the point where Amy kind of just stops. And you're so sad for her. She finally like realizes, you know, it wasn't fair for her to push her all this time, and she's gonna give up on him, and she'll always love him, and she's devastated, right? And then Warren shows up, and then they have an argument, and then she's like, "I'm no longer gonna push you. It's done." And he's like, "What? You're just gonna give up on me?" So that's like the scene at the end where he's like, "No, I love you, marry me." Oh, it's such a good scene. I love it so much. I know, it's ridiculous. And I will say that this book does start off slow. Because like the first chapter, you're with Derek, her cousin, who's the main lead in the 5th book. And they're kind of just explaining the first 3 books. They're just basically a recap, right? And then the 2nd chapter, you're with Tony and Rosalind, and then James and Georgina. So you do check in a lot with the older characters. I don't think they take over. And in this book, James, because later on in the series, James just takes over the whole books. James, I didn't find him annoying yet, because I was like, oh, you know, it's nice to see how their romance continues after the book and everything like that, right? So it isn't to that point where I get so annoyed because it seems like, why'd you write this book about anybody? Because you're just focusing on James. So it doesn't get to that point yet. It's still enjoyable, and I can't believe I've talked this long about this book, but I love it so much. Anyway, the second book was the cozy historical murder mystery, and it takes place 1920s in England, and it's called A Very English Murder, a Lady Eleanor Swift, book 1 from Verity Bright. In one word, freaking delightful. That's not one word, that's 2 words. Delightful. This book was delightful. I gave it 4 stars. Just because it's not, I don't know if it's a book that I would revisit, you know, but I am 100%. Can you hear like the gardening going on in my neighbors? Anyway, sorry about that. But this is completely a series I want to devour. So Eleanor Swift, I love her. She is so fun and she's so energetic and like she's complicated, you know? She traveled the world on a bicycle. You know, I mean, her uncle passed away and she goes to a state because now she inherits it, everything. And you could tell, like, there's always been like a fact in my life that I always keep when I'm meeting someone new. And I get it. This is a book. I'm not meeting anybody, but you tell a lot from person how they treat the staff, you know, whether it's their staff or a wait staff, you know, you just can tell a lot. Or like people working under them in a company, you could just tell, right? And she adores these people. She wants to be their friend. She doesn't like standing on ceremony. I think she has horrible taste in men because she kind of has a crush on her neighbor who's a lord as well. And his name is Lancelot. And he's sort of, I found him to be kind of buffoonish, but this is just the first book. Maybe in the books to follow, we get more depth with him. He's sort of like the classical party boy in the 20s, and he doesn't seem to like take her too seriously. And maybe that's what she likes, but I was like, girl, you know, because also there is the chief inspector, inspector. Sorry, I don't think he's the chief inspector, but he's a inspector detective from London, and he's trying to figure out what's going on. And apparently he's handsome because the girls in the shop were like kikiing about him, right? And like he seems to respect her, right? So I'm just like, she even says that she has horrible taste in men, right? So anyway, she first gets there and there's a storm and she's going for a walk, and the English bulldog, Gladstone, star of the show. I loved him. The little drooly tank that he was fantastic in this. And she witnesses a murder in the middle of a huge lightning storm, right? But no one believes her. The local cops don't believe her. The inspector believes her, but like there's no evidence, you know? So her and her butler have to figure out it on their own. And at one point she suspects the butler, and I was like, no, that's just a red herring. And I was right, that's just the red herring. I don't want to give too much away because again, murder mysteries, I don't want to, you know, give stuff away. But I will say when you find out who it is, looking back in the story, there wasn't too many clues to point to the bad guy, and that's another reason I give it a 4 stars. But at the same time, I had such fun time reading it. Like, it's just one of those books you could tell the author had a blast, you know, because you have a blast. And I was like, well, I feel like there could have been a little bit more hints as to who the actual murderer was. And I think there was too many red herrings thrown in there. But like, I just had freaking fun reading this. Like, I had a time. Like, this was great. And like, Eleanor, I adore her. I adore her POV. I adore her personality. It's quirky, yet, you know, strong-willed and stubborn. And she's like, well, if no one believes me, I'm gonna prove it wrong anyway, because there's a murderer running around and these idiots aren't taking me seriously. Nah. You know, so she's going to go figure it out. And her uncle had a lot of secrets. Because I'm sorry, what kind of uncle has like a skeleton key made that could open up any lock? First of all, how is that possible? But okay, sure, I'm in it. I'm down. Uncle was either like a professional thief or a spy. Let's go. Like, he has a huge reputation, but a good one in the village. he seemed to try to help ex-cons get back on their feet. Like, he seemed like a really good person. Later on, you find out what some of the things he did and why he kept Eleanor at an arm's length to keep her safe, which I always find that annoying, but in stories. But, you know, it's a classic. It's a classic, right? You can't, you know, it is what it is. But I had a blast. I did like who the murderer was. I was like, oh yeah, there's a few clues. I think there was like one clue for it. I think there could have been a little bit more. But she was just delightful. And I loved reading it. I loved being in her POV. I was down for the ride. I was like, at this point, I think it was like page 70. I was like, you know, at this point, and how many pages was it? I think it's like 374. But a lot of those were like, I think most of those pages at the end. So I'd say like 350. Because it had a lot of excerpts on like excerpts from the next books. Because this is a big series, which I'm happy about. But around page 70, I was like, you know, I don't even care if the murder makes sense. I am having a freaking blast. This is so much fun. I love her. Let's go, Ellie. Let's go. So that was my reading for the week. I had a great time. I found a new cozy mystery series I can't wait to devour. Revisited an old favorite. And yes, eventually I think I am going to go down the line of Marley and Anderson family books, because I am having fun reading them, and like there's little parts that I've forgotten or didn't really pay attention to, because like I did not remember the friendship between Jeremy and Amy in Magic of You, the cousins friendship, and I was like, oh, this is so cute and sweet. Look at them. You know, Amy had no problem. Like it's just nice to see that the Malorys don't give a shit that Jeremy is a bastard and raised in a tavern, and some of his colloquialisms are a bit lowbrow. They just love him and they accepted him completely. So it's nice to see that in like a historical book. You know what I mean? Anyway, I don't want to, but it's time for me to get back to the real world. Like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you later. Bye. Hi guys, welcome back to the Forgetful Scholar, and this week we're going to chat about books, 2 books, a cozy mystery and a historical romance. So, first book is going to be